John says in John chapter 1 that Jesus is the light shining in the darkness. And when he makes that statement, he adds, the darkness does not overcome the light. It does not comprehend the light. There's kind of a double meaning to that word, as we've been talking about. So this is, from John chapter 1 forward, one of the great themes of this gospel. It's, if you will, one of John's thesis statements. And I just want to start with this observation that when he makes a statement like this, he is not just saying something and saying to us, here's a nice thought for you to think about. He is making a statement that for the rest of his gospel, he's going to develop, he's going to argue, he's going to illustrate, and he's going to apply. So when John says Jesus is the light of the world, literally every single story and teaching after that is about this theme in one way or another. And the story we have this morning is no different. We have seen that John dramatizes the darkness as something that is normal. What is darkness in this world? We might think it's dramatic wickedness or all of the things that capture our attention, and we say, that's wrong, that needs to stop. We might think that's the darkness that John has in mind. It is not. John has in mind all the stuff that is normal to us. Everything we assume. Everything we think without reflecting, without criticizing, without evaluating ourselves. All of that is darkness to John, and he portrays it this way. The darkness is the things that we take for granted that are normal. And in that sense, when Jesus shines in the darkness, he is challenging our sense of what is normal. He is raising reasons for us to reflect, think, criticize ourselves, and to question the things that we always assume. And so as John unfolds this theme, he unfolds it by showing us, for example, a wedding steward who receives wine from purification jars that are dedicated for the purpose of purifying a Jewish worshiper from uncleanness. So he receives wine from those jars, and he says, this is the best wine of the day. Normally, the best wine is served first, but here we are toward the end of the feast, and here comes the best wine. And it's as if he says, weird, and goes right on drinking the next glass. Here's a man who understands that something abnormal has happened, but he doesn't want to take the opportunity to question what just happened here. Why are these jars being used in this way? Where did this wine come from? And why indeed is it being served last in the feast? Darkness is normal. Jesus is a challenge to what we think is normal. Or you get the story that we saw last week. In Jewish society, it was normal for a group of people who were invalids, sick of various diseases and various infirmities, to lie around a pool at the sheep gate near the temple, and superstitiously to wait for that pool to be stirred so that they could scramble into it and be healed by that magic. That was normal. This is just the way it is. So you got a guy lying around that pool for 30 years. And that's just the way it is, normal. And Jesus walks into that situation and asks that man who had been an invalid for all of those years, "Do you want to be healed?" Jesus challenges what is normal and says, "What do you want to happen here? Do you actually want to be healed?" And then he does heal the man, as we saw last week. So Jesus is the light shining in the darkness, but what he's doing as he shines is he's challenging everybody's assumptions about what is normal. And he is doing that with us as well. He is going to do that in a very particular way in this famous story this morning with two of his disciples. And eventually he's going to challenge each one of his disciples individually. John takes up this very famous story. It was famous at the time he wrote this. It appeared in all three of the earlier Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And as it appeared in those stories, the focus was on the 12, kind of as a group. But John the Apostle takes this story and he says, "I want you to know something more about what happened on this day." Jesus wasn't challenging us as a group. He was challenging us as individuals. He was speaking directly to each one of us. And I want to tell you how he did that. So John is telling us about the light shining in the darkness, but in this case, the darkness is in the 12 apostles themselves. So let's dive into this story. John chapter 6, verse 1, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. The other side meaning he left the Jewish or Israelite side, crossed the boundary, and is now on the Gentile side. And so that's a small move in terms of miles. It's a big move in terms of culture. So verse 2, a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs he was doing on the sick. So you go back to chapter 5, what he did in Jerusalem, where he said to a man around that pool, "Stand up, pick up your bed, and walk." So he was doing that kind of thing all over the place, and the crowd just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we look at this and we say, good, that's what we want to happen. We want the crowds to grow and multiply. We want more and more people to follow Jesus in big crowds. We love that. And they loved it in that day too. We'll see what Jesus' attitude towards this is later in the story. But Jesus goes up on a mountain. He sat down with his disciples. He's going to teach. And the Passover, the feast of the Jews, is close at hand. Again, it has already passed a couple of times, or at least once in this gospel. And look at verse 5 with me. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip. Now we'll look at what he said in a moment, but I want you to get the scene. This is out in the wilderness. It's a desert area. And he's up on a mountain, so this is difficult to get to. It's remote. And here comes this crowd. 5,000 men and their families in this crowd. So Jesus looks at this, and I think you can imagine, you can up on a mountain, you can see pretty far away. This is a slow-moving crowd of people. So Jesus turns to Philip, and he states the problem. The problem is, that's a big crowd. There are 12 of us, or 13 of us with me. And so, Philip, where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat? We've got to eat something. We're out here remote in the wilderness. So here come these people. where are we going to buy the bread? Notice that he's speaking right into what seems pretty normal. If you want bread, you have to go buy it. You either have to bake it yourself, or you have to go procure this somewhere. You got to have a caterer somewhere out there in the wilderness. And Jesus asks Philip, who's going to supply this? And where are we going to buy this? He is speaking directly to what Philip thinks is normal, and Philip answers in the same spirit. Jesus said this, John tips us off, to test Philip, for he himself knew what he would do. I just want to make this observation. Philip is a follower of Jesus, and a particularly fruitful one. We've already met Philip back in chapter 1. Philip is a guy that Jesus looked for and found in a city called Bethsaida in this same border region. He finds Philip and he starts teaching him. And that same day, Philip goes and he gets Nathanael, his friend, and brings him to see Jesus and hear his teaching. And so Philip is already a gatherer with this other guy, Andrew, his buddy. And we're going to talk more about this in a moment. But Philip's a good guy. He's a faithful guy. He's a follower of Jesus. I'll put a fine point on this. Philip hasn't done anything wrong. He hasn't made any mistakes here. He has been serving, and here, Jesus, in the middle of all of this, looks at a crowd of at least 5,000 people and turns to Philip and says to him, to test him, where are we going to buy bread for all those guys? As if it was Philip's problem. As if Philip had made some kind of mistake. Oh, I should have, I forgot to order from the caterer bread for 5,000 people and their families. My bad. No, it wasn't his bad. He hadn't done anything wrong. They didn't ask these people to follow them. In fact, at this moment, they're trying to get some rest. So, Philip hasn't done anything wrong here in the sense that he doesn't, if I can put it this way, he doesn't deserve to be punished for his lack of faith. And yet it's happening anyway. That is because Philip has assumptions about how the world works. You need bread? Go buy it. And out of these assumptions, Philip is trying to minister with Jesus. And that's not going to work, is it? Because Jesus is normal. And this darkness that is so normal for Philip of how you provide what you need, Jesus doesn't operate this way. Jesus is going to show this to Philip in a very particular way. So this test is coming to a man who's doing a pretty good job. Now, if you're like me, you sometimes wonder, why is God allowing this in my life when I haven't done anything wrong? Why do I need to be singled out this way for this or that problem, as if I made some mistake and caused this? I didn't. And so you may have conversations with the Lord along these lines. That's the position that Philip is in. And part of what I've had to figure out over the years is that these kinds of tests are not punishment at all. This is the light shining in the darkness. And I'm in the darkness and I need to move out of it, that's all. That's what needs to happen here. So you could put it this way. Jesus is pointing to Philip in the shadows of Philip's assumptions about how the world works. He's pointing to him and he's saying, come out here. Come closer to me. Come into the light. You need to see something. So Philip answers Jesus' question out of his assumptions. Verse 7, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. Pretty skeptical about this. From the Gospel of Mark, we know the apostles are all tired, very tired at this point. They're depleted. And so Jesus is piling more on them. You know, those people who well-meaningly say, well-meaningly? Is that a thing? I don't know. Who say with good intentions, God won't give you more than you can handle. I don't think those people have read the Bible, because he does this routinely. This happens all the time. And it happens in my life too. So this is more than Philip can handle, and he's trying to tell Jesus this. I don't have 200 denarii. I don't have 2/3 of a year's wages to buy all that bread. And if I did, it wouldn't be enough. This is bigger than what we can buy. And what Philip has just said is true. He is right, this pragmatist from the dark shadows. But in another way, he's also deeply wrong, because he could ponder. He's been around Jesus enough to know that Jesus doesn't really ask a lot of idle questions. He could say something like, I wonder, Jesus, if you have some other way to provide what we need. And of course, this is the question we never ask. And he does not ask it. However, he has a friend, his buddy Andrew. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Now, these guys are all from the same city. They're all from that border town of Bethsaida. They're all coming from this place where, yes, there are Jews there, but there are Gentiles flowing through all the time. Romans, Greeks, maybe some Persians thrown in, and everybody's there because it's a border crossing town. And it's a point of trade on the Sea of Galilee. All three, Peter, Andrew, and Philip, they're all from this town. So Andrew said to Jesus, well, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many? So he makes a suggestion. We actually do have some food. It's over there. 5 loaves and 2 fish. But obviously, I'm just saying stupid stuff because that's not enough. So, at least with Andrew, I love this about Andrew. He's looking for, another answer, an additional answer. He's kind of like Joseph in the Old Testament. You've got a big problem, Pharaoh. You've got a famine coming, and you don't have enough to deal with that famine. But what you should start asking is, what do you have? What have you got to deal with this? Yeah, it's not enough, but what do you have? And that's the kind of mindset that Andrew has. And so that's sort of an improvement on Philip. So he brings the kid over, and there's the 5 barley loaves, and so you know the story. Jesus takes up Andrew's suggestion, and he says, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, and yes, that is an intentional evocation of Jesus as shepherd, leading the sheep to the green places where there's lots to eat. So John sets that kind of atmosphere from Psalm 23. Mark does a similar thing. Mark gives you the rare detail here. Mark doesn't care about atmosphere. He's a plot guy. This happened, then this, and immediately this next thing happened. He doesn't care what color the house was painted. He doesn't care what jewelry the person was wearing, anything like that. He's just, we got to move on. I got a story to tell you. But he does tell you at this point that Jesus had the people sit down on the green grass, evoking Psalm 23. Jesus having the people sit down like a shepherd. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves. Now watch how this is narrated. Took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them, the loaves, all 5 of them. He distributed them to those who were seated. How many are seated? 5,000. 5 loaves to 5,000. John doesn't really care about how this went down. He doesn't do a big build-up. He doesn't give you any drama at all. He just says Jesus picked up the loaves and started distributing them to the 5,000 people. And the implication is then it was done, and nobody really noticed that it was done until it was all done. Very interesting to me how John narrates these miracles. It's like the previous chapter when he doesn't do any build-up, gives no drama. There's no swell of music in the background as he says, stand up, take up your bed, walk. And he did. That's all. There's a new normal. The light shining in the darkness is a new normal. It's a confrontation of the darkness. It's a conflict with the darkness, but it's still kind of normal. It's prosaic. It's daily. It's normal. Question: how normal is the power of Jesus in your life? I ask this because there's something that that I've noticed in my life, that I see the power of Christ, and it's kind of like, well, moving on is just like John. The next thing starts to happen, and it's very easy to forget about all that power I just witnessed, much less the power of the whole story before the last thing that just happened. So there's something kind of unhealthy about that, where I'm not doing enough to be thankful for the power of Christ in my life or to notice it. But there's also something kind of good about that I take a lot of comfort from. That the operation of Jesus in my life is becoming, in a sense, normal. It's just part of my daily existence. And yeah, I should pay a lot more attention to it. I really should. It would help me. And it would help you too. But I wonder if you could take some time to just reflect and ask the question, how normal is the power of God in my life? I'll just tell you, this is a big deal in the New Testament, that God in the New Testament is not shown to us in epic poetry. He's shown to us in plain as a post prose, daily stuff, normal stuff. But it's a new normal. Anyway, Jesus distributes all this bread and nobody quite realizes what is happening, and John himself declines to tell us how that worked. what it looked like, what it felt like, all the sort of things we want to know. What did it feel like, John, to watch Jesus keep dividing bread and the bread doesn't disappear? What did it feel like to see that? John doesn't care. He doesn't tell us, because he kind of knows if we knew what it felt like to him, we would try to duplicate that feeling in our own lives instead of concentrating on the substance of what happened. So he just omits it. So Jesus distributed all of this, and when they had eaten their fill, verse 12, now think about that. They eat and eat and eat of this bread and the fish. And then they are full. They ate their fill, which means the bread kept coming, and it wasn't like they got their ration, but they got more and more and more, up to the point where they were full. So, when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." He says here, I'm pushing the button and nothing's happening. There it goes. He says there's leftovers. So get some baskets and fill them. He says this to the 12 disciples. So they each take a basket. You got to imagine a large basket here. They gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with the fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. So you got 12 exhausted men. Exhausted from doing their own tour of healing and preaching, seeing the power of God work, casting out demons, and this is their break. And on their break, 5,000 men come tromping up the hill after them. And Jesus starts asking them, what are we going to do to get the bread for all of those guys? And so you hear their kind of sarcastic, edgy responses, like you could spend 2/3 of a year's wages and not have enough bread. Jesus, what are you thinking? This is not normal. And then on the other side of it, they have the experience of picking up a basket full, each one of them, of the leftover bread, the surplus. He's teaching all of these disciples individually. He's challenging Philip. He's challenging Andrew. He's saying, Andrew, you said this certainly wouldn't be enough. Watch this. And he's challenging all 12 of them in their sense of what is normal. So they gather up the fragments. And when the people saw the sign that he had done, when they realized what just happened, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." So we have here Jesus not really challenging the crowd. The crowd's just kind of there. They're extras on set in John's movie. The people he's challenging are the disciples, the people who follow him, who believe in him, who sacrifice for him, and he dumps this problem on them. He says, do something about this. And then he shows them how that is supposed to work. I provide. I know what I'm going to do before you ask. I give not just to give what is needed, I give in surplus, and I'm going to show you the surplus. Go pick it up. That's how this works. That's the new normal. So what about that crowd? We said, we would look at this and say, wow, things are growing. This is great. So the crowd says, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." This is a reference to Deuteronomy and Moses' prophecy. A prophet like me is going to come. Listen to him. And he's talking about Jesus. They're correct about this. But they instantly start doing the wrong thing with that information. Look at verse 15. In the acclaim that they are giving to Jesus, the YouTubers start live streaming about what needs to happen right now. They've got a great idea. Let's take Jesus by force and make him king. He's obviously equipped to provide for the nation, and if he can do this with bread, he can do it with swords and chariots and horses, and he can do it with victory, and he can do it with money. And just think what the hero could do if we put him in charge. So let's put him in charge. These conversations start happening in crowds, which is one of the things that John noted early on. There's darkness in human beings. Jesus knows that. He says at the end of chapter 2. And so when the crowd started to grow, Jesus did not entrust himself to them because he knew what was in man and didn't need anybody to tell him. If you trust those crowds, this is going to end badly. And in this case, they have completely misunderstood what Jesus came to do, because their assumptions of what is normal are completely wrong. And so Jesus leaves this crowd. He withdrew again, meaning he had done this before. He's done this several times. Crowd grows. Jesus leaves the crowd. Who does he care about? He cares about the people who are willing to stand up under his tests and keep going, who are willing to have their darkness dispelled, incident by incident. He cares about them. He doesn't care about this massive crowd and all of its dark assumptions about what needs to happen in Israel. So he leaves them. There's much more to this story, but I just want to return to these two characters who we've been talking about here. Some questions have been coming in. Let's see what they are. Okay, verse 11 reminds me so much of Psalm 23, "I shall not want, he makes me lie down in green pastures." Well, there you are. It is quite true. Well played. Where is the balance of relying on what God has given you and relying on the power of God? So you've got resources. God has given you some things. You should use that. You should be a good steward of that. You should multiply that. And you should, in a sense, depend on that. So what do we do here? How do we rely on the power of God? I think we have to start taking holistically the idea that God has already supplied some things, but he has left a big gap between what we have and what we need. So think of, just in strictly materialistic terms, what does our church need to do the Great Commission here in the Finger Lakes region? How much resources do we need? I mean, those resources just to reach this region are vast, because the need, the darkness is it is profound. It needs to be dispelled. It's going to be a fight to dispel it. So for us to imagine that somehow we have all that we need, we don't really need anything in order to do this kind of ministry, a kind of region transforming gospel ministry. Because that gap is just so large. I would just challenge you. God has given us immense resources as a church. Immense. I know many of you look at the resources we have now and compare it with resources that you saw maybe 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, and you're saying our resources are dwindling. We're going to run out. I look at this, coming into this situation and looking at similar situations from past ministries. I went for years in a church restart in which I really did not know whether we would be in business at the end of the month. Month after month after month, running on fumes, and yet watching God gradually grow the resources. I don't know what you're complaining about. I don't know what this dwindling is that you're perceiving there. Because the Lord has supplied you as a church with a king's ransom. The gap is big, yes. But what we have to do is take what he has supplied, pour it into the work, and trust his power to supply the gap. So my question to you earlier, how normal is the power of God to you? It needs to be pretty normal, honestly. And I'll just tell you, I really did not want to go through those years of wondering whether we were going to be in business at the end of the month. I didn't want to go through that. I didn't sign up for that job with eagerness, saying, "Yay, I get to see the power of God every month." It's difficult. But I will tell you that seeing the power of God does become normal. And that's good. As hard as it is, it's deeply good. I just want to be sure I'm not missing any questions here. Good questions there. Okay, let's land the plane. So you got these two disciples, Philip and Andrew. These two are going to stick together. We already revisited that we met them back in chapter 1 of John. And this is an indication, an instance, where John doesn't do anything without a reason. There's a longer story with Philip and Andrew. Part of that story we just encountered in John chapter 6. But that story goes on. If you turn the pages over to John chapter 12, I just want you to see something and the next step in the story with these two guys. Jesus has just done the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and he has just cleared out the temple. Again, this is after he's raised Lazarus from the dead. And so on in the midst of all of this, look at John 12:20. Now among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. in other words, not Jews. They went up to worship at the feast. So these Gentiles, these non-Jews, came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and asked him, "Sir, we wish to see Jesus." See what happens here? We think of Peter as the first one to witness to a Gentile. We think of Paul as the apostle to the Gentiles. Philip was actually first. Philip from the border town, Bethsaida. And the Greeks go to him because they recognize somebody they can deal with. They recognize something culturally that say he gets it. So they go up to him and say, "You're with Jesus. We've kind of seen you around with him. We know where you're from. You know who we are. Take us to Jesus." So what does Philip do? Philip went and told Andrew. Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. And Jesus answered them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." He says to them, "I am going to my death, but you two, Philip and Andrew, you just saw what's about to happen. The whole world is about to break open, and the Gentiles, all the nations are going to come to me. You saw it." In other words, Philip and Andrew have a unique calling from Jesus, and he's testing them. He's challenging their sense of the normal in order to draw them out of the shadows of their assumptions and into his light so that they can fulfill their calling. What is he doing with you? Jesus has found you, just like he found Philip. Jesus is teaching, testing, and challenging you, just like he did to Philip and Andrew and all the rest of the disciples. You have a unique calling. That's what this is about. This is about the new normal taking root and forming in your life, so that you approach new things in the future with a new sense of the power of Jesus in your life, with a deeper sense of how he operates. Maybe you're not less scared in the future. Maybe you're more scared. Maybe you're not less apprehensive. Maybe you're more apprehensive. But when that day comes, you've got some experience walking with Jesus. And whether it's fear or apprehension or whether it's dread, whatever it may be, you're going to walk out of that and you're going to walk straight into the calling that Jesus has given to you. It comes from him. I could put this differently. Jesus is not broadcasting and hoping that you tune in. Jesus has found you, and he is talking to you, and he is saying, "Trust me, follow me. I have something for you to do."